What do you do when the bottom falls out? I have a theory on this. When the bottom falls out, you have two choices. You can fall, or you can fly. 2 years ago, the summit had recently wrapped up. The theme that year was unstoppable. And I have to tell you, my life felt pretty unstoppable. I was in the baby stages of building my team. I'd hired an admin. I was training my first buyer's agent. Business was good. We were wrapping up my best year ever. My husband had recently been promoted to a vice president position with his company, making him the youngest member of their executive team. We were accomplishing things that had been on our vision boards and bucket lists for years prior. We had 3 happy and healthy kids, 3 rambunctious dogs, and a white picket fence. You could absolutely say we were living the American dream. And then the bottom fell out. A few days before my birthday, my husband Paul went in for a minor dental procedure. So minor, in fact, that he didn't even mention to me that he was going in. It was no big deal. Except something went wrong, and his mouth was electrocuted, burning him from the inside out. This led to catastrophic damage to the blood vessels of his mouth, eventually causing him to lose the bone, gum tissue, and teeth throughout the entire upper portion of his mouth. This minor dental procedure turned into 2 years, 40 sessions in a hyperbaric chamber to the tune of $100,000, and more than a dozen surgeries. Painful? Yeah. Paul endured physical, emotional, psychological pain unlike anything I could have imagined. Now let me share with you an example of the true definition of work ethic. Paul would schedule his surgeries for a Friday so that he could recover over the weekend and be back to work by Monday. This was inspiring. It also took everything that he had out of him. He would come home exhausted and in pain. To cope, he would lock himself in a dark room and just try to hang on until the next day. So in a very real way, he disappeared from our family for months, for years. Overnight, I went from being one half of a power couple to being a pseudo-single mom, a caretaker, and scrambling to keep it all together. I was devastated by his injury. Watching him suffer was unbearable. I was exhausted trying to keep up on everything on my own and give him the care that he needed. And I felt guilty for feeling exhausted. It was brutal for me, for him, for our family. During some of the most intense pain that he faced, the roots of his teeth were actually exposed. And we live in Utah, and it was winter. It is cold in Utah. I couldn't do anything to take away that excruciating pain he would feel anytime the cold air would hit his mouth. But I could take him to Maui, where the air was much warmer, which is what I did. My mom came and stayed with our kids for a few days, and we spent some time on Maui, resting, relaxing, breathing the warmer air. When we got home, my mom asked if I could take her to the hospital. She needed an MRI. I was surprised because my mom was in perfect health. She explained that she had taken our daughter to a scheduled doctor's appointment, and while she was there, she mentioned some symptoms she was having, nothing major, a weird plugging that she had in her ear. The doctor suggested that she go get an MRI just to rule out anything scary. I will never forget falling to my knees or my silent scream when I got the call from my mom that they had not ruled out anything scary. My mom, my rock, had a tumor the size of a pool ball pressing against her brain. And she too would be heading into surgery. And listen, this was almost enough to break me. And it wasn't over yet. My uncle, who I adored, who was just 44 years old, was struck and killed while out walking his dog. And my son began to struggle with anxiety and depression. This led to several hospitalizations, which, because of the change in our family dynamic, I mostly had to make decisions about and manage on my own. I don't have to tell the parents here, there is nothing more brutal, nothing more debilitating than when your kids are suffering or in danger. It felt like I was standing in the ocean and I'd been knocked down by a wave, and every time I would almost catch my breath. Every time that I'd almost get my head back above water, I'd get hit with another wave. Can any of you relate to that? In this time of tragedy, I had to find something to hang on to. I needed something that I could be passionate about, something that would give me a sense of purpose. And I found my passion. I am passionate about possibility. I am passionate about what we can create and achieve, not when the stars are perfectly aligned and the temperature is just right and everything is so-so, but what's possible when we are in the middle of the storm and fighting for our lives? What's possible when the bottom falls out and we choose to fly? We talk a lot in this business about having a why. I have to tell you, at this time in my life, I had a lot of why nots. There were countless reasons that I couldn't or shouldn't grow my business while we were managing these tragedies. I was acting as a caretaker to multiple people that I loved. I didn't have spousal support. I was grieving. But here's the thing. All of those why nots were actually my whys. And they were the most powerful whys I had ever had. I may have been powerless to prevent the tragedies that my family was facing, but I could protect them while we were in the middle of it. And when that was the why I was working towards, there was no room for anything but success. Every phone call that I made meant that if things didn't go well with Paul's recovery, financially, we would be okay. Every Zillow lead that I converted meant that my mom didn't have to be scared that she wouldn't be able to afford the time she needed to take off work. I could say, "Don't worry, Mom, I've got it. I'm writing a check. How much?" Can you imagine how powerful it was to have that in the back of my mind every time I got on the phone? Every listing appointment that I went on meant that I could get the very best care imaginable for my son, and that his treatment would never be dictated by the least expensive option. Money didn't make our problems go away, but it did put me in a much better position to manage those problems, a much better position from which to protect my family. And when that was my why, there were no options but success. Stop for a minute and think about your why nots. What are those obstacles that you come up against when you think about taking your life to the next level? Those are the very reasons you need to do it, and do it now. It's just a matter of reframing and flipping that script. Now, I'd like to speak for a moment to the ladies, to my wire sisters out here. Ladies, there's this age-old conversation around women in business, right? We all know the question, can you truly have it all? I've heard it said, you can have it all, but not all at once. And that comes close, but still doesn't quite hit the mark. What I know is this. We can have it all. We can have it all at once. We can do it all. We just can't do it all in the exact same moment. People that lean towards being multitaskers, which can absolutely be women and men, run the risk of dividing themselves up so much in any given moment that they're never truly present and therefore less effective. They're thinking about their kids when they should be on the phone. They're texting clients at the dinner table when they should be engaging with their family. They're constantly making themselves wrong for what they're not doing, trying to do it all at once, and therefore none of it very well. Is this feeling familiar to anyone? Here's what you need to know. There isn't a damn thing you can do about the latest challenge you're facing at home when it's time for you to get on the phone and call your 554s. So stop dwelling on it. And at midnight, there is nothing that can be done to salvage your deal, so stop lying awake worrying about it. Now I know, this is easier said than done. That's because the ability to compartmentalize is a skill. And like all other skills, it takes practice to develop. It's a skill that was absolutely essential to me as I was dealing with this time of crisis to be able to survive and continue to grow. So here's how it works. When you have those doubts, those concerns, those distractions creep into your brain, you get to ask yourself 3 questions. 1, can I do anything about this right now? 2, is acting on this now tactically urgent or emotionally urgent? And 3, is acting on this now the highest and best use of my time? So when it was time for me to get on the phone and make calls, and I'd have a thought pop into my head like, was Paul's last surgery successful? I'd ask myself, is there anything I can do about that right now? The answer was no. So I would take a deep breath and let it go. The only moment you can breathe, therefore, the only moment you can be, is right here, right now. When it was time for me to prepare to meet with a new client, and I'd have thoughts about my son's medication and maybe some changes that might be beneficial, I could have stopped what I was doing and immediately started Googling and making calls. But while it was emotionally urgent, because it's the thought that had popped into my head, it wasn't tactically urgent. I could handle those things at a different scheduled time, and the result for my son would be exactly the same. So I'd calendar a time to do so, then take a deep breath and let it go. When I was having dinner with my kids, or sitting at my mom's side in her hospital room, or getting Paul home and settled from a surgery, and a client issue would arise, I'd ask myself, is handling this now the highest and best use of my time? It wasn't. So it got calendared for a time that it was, or delegated to someone else, and then, you guessed it, deep breath and let it go. Once I mastered this technique, I could shut down my emotional squirrel reaction on a dime. And here's what it allowed for, what it made possible. I was at Paul's side 100%, supportive, there with him as he headed into surgery. Then, when the anesthesia kicked in and he was out, I knew that I had 2 hours that my being there and crying and worrying and stressing did nothing for him, nothing for me, and nothing to better our situation. So I would shift, and I would go take a listing. And while I was there on that listing appointment, I was 100% engaged with that client. And I was there and present and focused on my presentation and my conversion. And when I was done with that, I shifted back and was there with Paul as he got out of surgery and came out of anesthesia. This made it so that I could manage crisis without having it devour me or devour my day. Now please, don't mistake this to mean that I got through this time without shedding tears. Guys, it was awful, and it hurt. And I was sad and mad and depressed and angry and all of the things that you would expect in a time of crisis. I just wasn't those things when it was time for me to be on for my team or my clients. I wasn't those things when it was time for me to show up for my family and be the strong support that they needed. This meant that I scheduled my breakdowns. Not kidding. I calendared them. My coach told me if it's not on your schedule, it doesn't exist. And I took her advice to heart. So if I was going to visit my son in the hospital, I knew I was going to be really emotional after that. So I had time scheduled to go sit somewhere quiet and feel whatever I needed to feel. I could cry or scream or just sit in silence, and there was no expectations, no need for me to be on or behave a certain way. You cannot escape your emotions. The only way out is through. And it was important that I allowed myself to feel them. I was just strategic about when I would feel them. After my scheduled breakdown, I'd have 15 minutes to put myself back together. Fix my face, take some deep breaths, do something to change my state. Having these scheduled breakdowns also made it so that if I had emotions come up at a time that I needed to be productive, I could tell myself, not now. You can cry about that in 2 hours. Again, that allowed me to be fully engaged in whatever I needed to be handling at the moment. Now, despite the best coping mechanisms, everyone needs a life raft. Everyone needs those people that they can reach out to when it just gets to be too much. So when you're going through crisis, find your life raft. And here's my suggestion. Find them outside of the storm. I have a loving, engaged, involved, amazing family, but they were in the middle of this crisis with me. My husband needed to focus on surviving this himself. I couldn't bring my stress or anger or sadness or upset to him. It wouldn't have been fair. It's hard for those going through the crisis with us to be that support and comfort that we need. So find your life raft outside of the storm. My coach was an absolute life raft to me at this time. She made sure that I was taking care of myself through the process. And one of the things that came out of her support was my understanding that I needed a more powerful morning routine. I had shared with her that because of the changes in my household dynamic, I felt like I was starting every day in reaction. From the time I woke up, before my feet even hit the floor, I was handling my kids' needs, my husband's needs, my team's needs, my clients' needs, and whatever the emergency du jour was. I was starting every day in reaction, in effect, and inevitably behind. Her answer? You need to wake up earlier. This was not, by the way, the answer that I wanted to hear. It was, however, absolutely what I needed to hear. And my coach isn't known for telling people what they want to hear anyway. So I changed my morning routine, and it changed everything. Now, in the morning, my phone goes on Do Not Disturb. The only call that I take before 9 a.m. is a 5-minute call with the 5 a.m. club. A powerful group of people that are committed to making the choice to be awake and great at that early hour. Apart from that, I get quiet. I needed to find that quiet in my life. It had been absolutely absent. That quiet mental space allows me to be in touch with how I'm feeling about everything that's going on. It allows me the creativity and the freedom to plan out my life and my business without the pressures of dealing with whatever's in front of me to handle. So I get quiet, I do my affirmations and my gratitudes, and then I start the day in a very powerful way. I unload and reload the dishwasher, and I do a load of laundry. It may seem absurd to call this powerful, but it's a tangible result. Before most people are awake, I am accomplishing things that I can see. And in a time of my life that I could have a day turned sideways on a moment's notice, that proved to be powerful for my psyche. Then I make my kids breakfast. This starts my day with service to my family, and it also makes it so that their first sensory experience is of my love and care for them. Then I go for a walk. Now, I walked every morning for a few months, and then I discovered something. I was walking faster. I was walking further. I was feeling better. Walking turned into running. Previously, I didn't run. Unless I was being chased or hurrying into a Starbucks before they closed, it didn't happen. But I found I was enjoying it, and I sought out other workouts that I enjoyed. I hired a trainer. I fell in love with my Peloton bike. I felt stronger. I started waking up even earlier so that I could work out more. Previously, when people would say to me, "My workout time is my me time," I threw up a little bit in my mouth. I just didn't get it. But all of a sudden, I got how empowered I felt after working out. I got how I could physically work through the grief I was feeling. I got how it was my me time. Eventually, I thought, I'm feeling really good from the exercise that I'm doing. I'd probably feel even better if I was eating well, too. So as many in the Tom Ferry ecosystem have done, I read the 21-Day Metabolic Reset by Brad Davidson. I implemented the ideas that he talked about, and I was amazed at how good I felt, and how much better equipped I was to handle the crisis and the tragedies that we were facing. Now, I had started to lose weight, but I want to be very clear. This was a byproduct of my morning routine. It wasn't the goal. After having lose weight on the personal section of my business plan year after year, and being the same weight or heavier on January 1st, year after year, I looked up and I made a decision. And the decision was this: if I don't lose 1 pound, if I don't drop 1 inch, eating this way, exercising this way, caring for myself in this way, it will make me a better mother. It will make me a better wife, a better caretaker, a better business owner, a better woman. So the weight loss, it was a side effect. It wasn't the goal. And this surprise side effect is that I lost more than 50 pounds. Can we bring up that picture? I lost more than 50 pounds, and I kept it off with ease because there was no praying when I got on the scale. There was no judgment, no attachment. My weight simply changed because I changed. So through one of the most chaotic and painful times in my life, I went from a tight size 12 to a comfortable size 4. I grew a thriving business. We went from just over $300,000 GCI, my best year ever before tragedy struck, to almost $900,000 GCI when we were in the middle of the storm. Thank you. I learned a lot about myself going through these challenges. I wasn't defined by them. We aren't defined by the challenges that we face. Who we are defines how we meet and overcome those challenges. My family and I, we got through that time. After 2 years and more than a dozen surgeries, Paul is healthy, healed, and whole. The grace with which he faced this time in our lives continues to inspire me. My son got the treatment and care that he needed, and he still makes me a little bit crazy because he's a teenager and that's his job, but he's going into his senior year. He's doing wonderful things and having a wonderful life. My mom's surgery was successful. She continues to have a clean bill of health, and her brain must be doing okay because in December, she'll be receiving her doctorate. Life moved on. Because you guys, that's what life does. How awful would it have been if at the end of the 2 years, when we were done dealing with these tragedies, I had allowed my whys to just be why nots. And I had added to the crisis and the challenge of this time by having my business fall apart. Or what if I hadn't listened to my coach in taking care of myself, and I had added to everything that we were dealing with by having a personal health crisis? Whatever tragedies I faced, whatever tragedies you are facing, they too shall pass. You determine what's left behind when they do, if it's further chaos or if it's a life by design. If you are in the middle of the storm, I challenge you. Allow your why nots to be your why. Focus, compartmentalize, structure your schedule to support you so that when the bottom falls out, you can fly. Thank you.
Hey, it's Coach Tom Ferry. Have you been considering hiring a coach? If so, click the link below and check out what we do.